Northern California.
What's going on, YouTube? It's artisanmc, and today I'm going to review Andor episode 8. Now, I watched this episode when it came on Tuesday at midnight, but since then I've watched it about 2 more times because I wanted to get a good feel for it, and I was tired the first time I watched it. One of the things I actually translate to people or inform people on when I tell them to watch this show is to understand the 3-episode format that it goes in. Is that 2 episodes out of 3 will be setup. 3rd episode will actually be action. This is episode 8, being that we're in the 2nd episode of setup after the episode where the heist actually happened. I like that format. For me, it's good, especially if you're doing a 12-issue run. It's actually pretty good to do it that way because it makes a lot of peaks in the series, right? So this episode, you find out what happens after the last episode where Andor, gets arrested. And Daedra Miro gets control over the sector that Ferrix is in. I'd say in this episode, you had 3 main stories, being the story with Andor, the story with Miro, story with Cyril, the story with Mon Mothma. And you see some of those stories finally coming together and connecting up with each other. Now, as far as Andor goes, right after court, he's taken out back. He's put on a shuttle and he's sent off to Narkina 5. He's gone right to the prison, right to doing some hard labor. And you get the understanding of what the Empire is doing with all these increased sentencing. And basically, they found a way to turn people into droids, to replace the droids that they were using during the Clone Wars with human beings or humanoid beings. At this facility, you have the introduction of a prison complex in this Empire era. This is post Revenge of the Sith. So this is what a prison looks like post Revenge of the Sith. And Andor is taken in and processed. And one of the things you notice that everything is very clean, like the Empire usually does. Everything is really stark colors. Whites, blacks, grays. It just is what it is. No mixing, is stark colors. And Andor is processed into this pod 5B or 5D, I think it is. And he is introduced to a new character, Kino Loy, played by Andy Serkis. Now, this was a surprise for me. I was not expecting anybody that I did not know or any actors I knew of in this episode. I was not expecting that at all. So seeing Andy Serkis show up in this was a welcome treat. And his character, Kino, explains to Andor that he is the floor manager and what the deal is and what they're supposed to be doing. And basically what they're doing in this whole episode is throwing him on the line, turning out Imperial parts. Now, what the parts are for, you don't know, but they have a quota and they need to meet it, and they're timed on everything. Now, having been a regular worker and a supervisor in corporate organizations, I can tell you this whole idea of performing on a metric against the clock is real. It's happening right now in labor. It is. All of that is not something that's just made up in sci-fi. It's what's happening now. As a supervisor, that's what I did. I kept track of the metrics. I kept track of the metrics. and making sure people were doing their work in the given amount of time, if not lower, and really trying to drive that production. It's happening right now. So watching this scene is really interesting to me to see, oh, that's a clever put in on this. Other thing that you get is that you understand how prisoners are kept in this place without being punished, without the guards really having any real weapons or whatnot. And basically, they're all forced to walk around barefooted on electrified floors. So at any point in time, they can electrify them to punish them for working too slow or doing what they're not supposed to. And it does lend a bit of a psychological angle to what you're doing, because although you're always standing on something, you know in the back of your mind you can be punished at a whim, and that gives a psychological complex in a way to people doing work. They want to perform quicker, they want to do this because they don't want to get that shock. And to me, this setup in this scene remind me of two things. The first thing it reminded me of was the movie The Platform on Netflix, how there were two men to a floor and they had to do certain things on the floor, and food would pass between them from floor to floor. The other thing that it reminded me of was the Sylvester Stallone movie called No Escape, I believe it was, or Lockup, where he is a contractor that's trained to test prisons and escape from prisons. And by some hook and a crook, he actually gets put into a new prison that he has to figure out how to get out of. Escape Plan. That was the name of the movie, Escape Plan. So it's pretty interesting because, like I tell you guys, I like heist movies. The other thing I like, other than heist movies, is escape movies. They always use the same kind of brain cells, creative thinking. So at this point, we know where Andor is, and you're seeing the situation that he's in, and you still wonder, how the hell is he going to get out of here? No telling. He's there for a couple weeks, and that's what it is by the end of the episode. Now, the other stories that are going on during this time are the stories of Cyril, Mon Mothma, and I'm forgetting her name, Andor's adopted mother, right? Now, Cyril, for the whole time that he's been at the Bureau of Standards and Measures, he has been putting in false reports, looking and querying about a Cassian Andor, trying to get some kind of feedback from the corporation or hires up about finding Cassian Andor. And sure enough, we begin this episode with a couple of ISB Imperials rolling up on him in his little hexagonal cubicle and pulling him out of there to have a talk with him. Now, this talk is interesting in the sense that this is where you get one character finally meeting another character, in which Cyril Karn is introduced to Daedra Miro, Supervisor Daedra Miro. Now, we already know that Daedra Miro has been put in charge of the Ferric sector, right? And she's on this hunt to track down the Myth and Star Path and try to figure out who's behind this grand scheme. Karn is coming at it from a different direction. Karn wants to find Cassian Andor because he wants to find Cassian to clear his name of that whole Pharynx debacle, as it were. And in conversation with Miro, the two of them meeting, they figure out that Karn has not read the report that Lieutenant Blevin actually filed. Karn doesn't know what's in it. And Miro, on her own curiosity and Karn's urging, gives him a copy of the report to read. Now, Miro goes off to make a meeting, which is an important meeting, to where she is sitting there with her supervisor, Patagas, and the other unnamed supervisor over him that I can't remember the guy's name for the life of me. And she is outlining her case after being in charge of this sector and doing her research. What she's figured out is there was a second person there with Cassian Andor that may be responsible for all this theft of Imperial instruments and it being redistributed throughout the galaxies to rebels. And she's lining out her case to Pradagast's superior. And he is inclined to listen to her with a little bit of reinforcing and backup from Pradagast. It's like, yeah, there should be somebody there. The somebody that they are looking for that they have codenamed Axis is actually Luthen. They're trying to get a line on Luthen because he seems to be at the center of all this rebel activity. So they're really looking for him, although they do not know his name yet. They do know it's a male, and he possibly helped Cassian Andor escape Ferrix. Now, when this meeting, she goes back to talk to Karn, and that is where Karn informs her of what is missing from the report. And from that, he actually tries to get on board with Miro. He wants to work with them because he really does want to clear his name. And I think Miro senses a little bit of something in him because she does tip him off in a sense. And the tip off is that if he continues to file these false reports, somebody above her will respond. It'll be out of her hands. And to me, that's kind of a tip off. It's thrown out there like it's a threat. It's thrown out there like it's a threat, but at this point, I believe that Miro is testing Karn to see how badly he actually wants to resolve this case. He would be an asset on her team, but she wants him to prove himself first. All right. So she leaves, giving him that little bit of information, and Karn kind of smiles like he figures out he has a way in. Because you know what he's going to do? He's going to file another false report, probably 3 more, just to get the attention of whoever is above her, so he can get called into their office and talk with them specifically. Now, during this time, you also get the story of what's going on with Cassian's mother figure back on Ferrix. And it turns out that she has been doing some rebel stuff. She has been trying to gain information on Ferrix about the little detachment that is there, the Imperials that is there, and feed that information to the rebellion. And Bix has been checking on her to see how she's doing, and she's not doing too well. She's taken a fall. Her leg is hurt. She's cold. She's coughing. She's probably on her way out by my guess. She's probably on her way out. While Bix is there, Cassian's other friend, I believe his name was Boros, comes by and checks on her, and they have a little conversation outside about where could Cassian possibly be, and did either of them know? And neither of them actually know. Cassian bugged out without telling any of them where he was going. So none of them know. They do not know that Cassian has actually left, been captured, and is thrown in prison on another planet. He's using a fake name. So nobody really knows where he is. Now, unbeknownst to them, while they're having this conversation outside, Bix and Boros are being watched by Vale. And Vale has come to Ferrix by being ordered by Luthen's aide, Clea, to take out Cassian Andor. So she's undercover on Ferrix watching Cassian's mother's house. And she sees Bix and Boros having their conversation. Now, while she's sitting there, in strolls Sita, who was the other member of the crew that, robbed the garrison. And they have a little bit of a conversation while watching. And it turns out that they haven't seen each other much since the robbery. And once getting back together, Sita is going to sit there posted, watching for Andor to show up at his mother's home. And Vale just wants them to leave, and Sita has to break her down and tell her, no, this is before everything else. We take what's left over. That she is hardcore devoted to the rebel cause. and nothing, not even her little girlfriend, is going to sway her from it. Now, this is an interesting scene in a sense because you do get a little bit more information about who Vale is. And it comes in the quip that Sita gives her about staying and who she could be, and she could possibly be a rich girl running away from her family. And Vale tells her that's cold, even for Sita. That is who Vale is. Vale is somebody's rich daughter running away from her family. That's why the shot is cold, because it's her. It's casting this idea on her. And Sita is reinforcing with her how firm she is on the rebellion, and it's not just a plaything for her. That Vale may not be as committed because Vale comes from money. With Sita has to reinforce that with Vale, that this is not a game. This is for real. This is what life is. It's not about just the pleasure of having kicks with your girlfriend. No, this is what it is. So that in turn sets up the split between the two of them, at the same time setting up that Sita is going to be posted there on Ferrix. She is not leaving until Andor shows up there. And she is just going to sit and lurk and watch. Now, the conversation between Bix and Boros goes to the point to where Boros stays and Bix decides she needs to try to contact Luthen, that she needs to know about Andor and at least wants to tell him that his mother is sick. And so she goes back to the scrapyard where she has the hidden communicator for the rebels. And she goes there and sends a signal out to Luthen. Now, back on Coruscant, Luthen's aide, Clea, hears the message and chastises Luthen. Now, this bothered me for a minute, that this is supposed to be Luthen's aide, and she is really getting in his ass that he is slipping and whatnot. He seems almost compliant to her, in a sense, because she's reminded him what the mission is and trying to keep him on mission. And something tripped in me seeing this scene. Which was reaffirmed later on. We get to the rest of Luthen's story part of this show. But Clea tells him that they need to cut off the signal and cut off the transmission and not even answer back to this. And Luthen is telling her possibly could, because it could help them find Andor, that Bix may have information to find Andor, which they are looking for as well, because as long as Andor is out there, Luthen is vulnerable. He's vulnerable. He can be exposed. All right. Under some duress, Luthen agrees with Clea, and they terminate the signal and do not respond to Bix. Bix is frustrated back on Ferrix, but her frustration is furthered by the next morning, when the next morning there's banging, there's stuff going on, and she goes out there, and the scrapyard owned by her friend Pack, who has the signal in it, is being ramshackled by Imperials. Pack has been arrested and detained, and she is out there, and apparently they're looking for her ass too. And now she is on the Empire's list. They know her name, they're looking for her, and they capture her. Now, after they capture her, you get the next overlap of characters to where Pack has been interrogated, and when they bring Bix in, he's still there. And it turns out the person there that has been interrogating him was Supervisor Miro. That she's there on Pharynx trying to get information, and now she is going to have a little sit down with Bix about who she's looking for, which is Cassian Andor. That kind of ends stuff for those characters. So in this episode, you get Miro meeting Karn and Bix in the same episode. So those story points are crossing over on each other. The other point to this story is Luthen, when he leaves Coruscant after not taking Bix's message, he leaves Coruscant on his ship and goes off to the world of Segramilo. And when he goes to this planet, you get the first signs of something familiar going on there. And when he comes into this room, he ends up sitting down and talking to Saul Guerrera, played by Forrest Whitaker. And this is the first time you get to see a younger Saw Gerrera, in a sense, before Rogue One. Now, if you're watching the Clone Wars, you may have had a lot more experience with Saw Gerrera. If you haven't watched the Clone Wars animated CG animated show, your first time seeing Saw Gerrera was in Rogue One, which it was for me because I wasn't watching the Clone Wars animated show. So seeing Saw Gerrera and his faction of rebels and Luthen sitting down and trying to barter with him to go and meet with another guy, the conversation between Luthen and Saw Gerrera is really good in a sense because you see where Saw is coming from and you see where Luthen is coming from. And it almost reads as a little bit of desperation on Luthen's part. Mind you, even during the conversation, he is not claiming responsibility for stealing that 80 million. He is not. He's not telling anybody that, which is smart because if nobody knows you got it, nobody's looking for it, right? He denied it to Saw Gerrera. He denied it to Mon Mothma. You don't have shit, right? But things still need to go on for the rebellion because he is, in his way, trying to force the Empire's hand to make them crack down harder on people so more people have to stand up and realize what is happening with the Empire. Now, through all that conversation, what Luthen does that tips his hand a little bit to me is that Luthen really impresses upon Saw Gerrera that he needs to work with these other rebel factions. And Saw Gerrera names them all off, and they all seem like they're different partisan groups that should not be working together at all. But Luther impresses upon them is that to actually have a victory and win real freedom, they need to all come together and they need to work together. And this is what gives me the inclination that this and a couple other things, but it leads me to believe Luthen is a Jedi. That Luthen is a Jedi who possibly escaped the Purge, him and his Padawan. And they set themselves up with covers right on Coruscant. Now, this would explain why Luthen has a lot of this Jedi hunter or Sith hunter armors and all these antiquities and stuff like that. This would explain why he has them, where he possibly got them from. Maybe he got them from the Jedi Temple. Maybe he got them on missions that he was on. He is there and set up on Coruscant, and he is possibly a Jedi working undercover to help bring about the fall of the Empire. That's why the disguises. That's why the hiding in plain sight. That's why he knows stuff about people with no real discernible means on how he knows it. Because one of the things that Saw Gerrera says when he names off all these different factions, he still has to ask Luthen, and who are you? What are you? Nobody knows what Luthen's actual end game or faction that he applies to is. No one knows. And to me, that means Luthen is a Jedi. He wants to see the fall of the Empire and the Emperor because he knows what they are. But he has to do it in secret, in a sense, because he's alone. So he's using the rebels to build a force that can rise against the Empire from the shadows. And I think that's kind of interesting. If Luthen does turn out to be a Jedi, I'll be happy with that. That'll make me happy. But if he doesn't, he doesn't. But to me, that's what it reads as. Why else would he have a kyber crystal, a blue kyber crystal worth 30,000 credits? Why would he have that? Because he took apart his lightsaber and kept the crystal. He's hiding in plain sight with a cover, and he's tired of doing it. But trying to raise people to help him take down this empire, which he recognizes it for, is going to take some work. And that's how he's figuring out how to do these things. I think that's who he is. Now, The other side story with Mon Mothma is not too much going on with Mon in this one. She's at a dinner party. It seems like it's the same fucking dinner party from the last episode, pretty much. But other than that, it's not. She's wearing a different outfit. Tay comes back and they have a little conversation, and they're understanding that it's getting difficult to move the money around more because the Empire is creeping more into the banking and everything else and watching everybody's money. And this is toughing it out for Mon Mothma because it's pushing her to the point that she will have to be exposed. She will. She can't gather the money she needs to help the rebels that she wants to, the way she wants to in the Senate. And the Senate is becoming more and more terrified, in a sense, but just signing off on this stuff because they're kind of scary, well-to-do people. So Mon Mothma is in a position to where she's going to have to make some other moves and make them kind of quickly, or she, in some senses, will be revealed. And for me, that's the end of the episode, parsing up those bits of story. Was it an episode where there's a lot of action? No, there's not a lot of action happening. Is there a lot happening on the screen? No, not really. You're introduced to a lot more characters on the part of Andor. You're introduced to a lot more story in the part of Miro, Bix, and Karn. You're getting their stories overlapping with each other a bit. And it's more of a sense that you're closing the net in a sense to find out where the hell is Cassian? Where's Cassian? Who's going to find him first? And who's going to get to him first? And we all know, the audience knows where Cassian is. Cassian's in prison. Cassian out there cranking out robot parts and trying not to get killed or shot to death. And for me, I think it's a really low place for Cassian because you remember through the earlier episodes, you find out that he was a child that was in prison for a while, for a number of years. And so him being back in prison has to be that psychological, almost a breaking point for him. But having been through it before, he gets back into the routine of it. This is just what it is, whatever. And that's kind of tough for that character because you saw how much he was fighting for his freedom and trying to be out and be free and be away from all this BS. And now he is in a situation where people are wanting to know about the Empire and the rebels and stuff like that and what's going on the outside world, but he can't sit there and tell them, yeah, I'm the reason for it. I stole all that money from the garrison, and that's why the Empire is cracking down on everybody. So I think there is a little low-key amount of guilt on Andor's part that he knows he has to kind of figure out or feel it that what he did, what he was a part of, caused all this extra stuff that's going on now, even his incarceration, in a sense. It caused it. So maybe he feels that, maybe he don't, maybe he's just resigned to the fact that here I am all over again. Can't really tell. But it is an interesting situation for that character to find himself in. The music on this episode was better. It actually fit this time. It's still the same noisy stuff, but it fit in the beginning. It fit. Didn't fit in the last episode at the end. It fits in this episode in the beginning. It kind of works. I do see a small complaint with Diego Luna's acting because he does only have one expression. And it is just wide-eyed and scared and stuff. I was like, oh, this is getting boring as fuck. That was kind of lame. And that was a critique that some other people had made that I was kind of ignoring. But this episode, it was like blaring. That's all he did was make that same fucking face. But I'm willing to give it a pass and move on to the next episode. And the one thing that I really didn't like about this episode was I didn't like seeing people's feet. Don't get into people's feet. I am the complete opposite of Lord Laris in House of the Dragon. I'm not interested in seeing people's toes and feet and how they not, perfectly symmetrical, clip, bloody dirt. I'm not into that shit. I don't need to see people's feet on screen. I really don't. I'm not interested in seeing, especially not no damn dirty feet. I'm good, dude. I'm good. Not interested in the least bit to me. But That's it. That's my review of Andor episode 8, Narkina 5. Like, share, subscribe, support the stream if you feel so inclined. And I will see you guys next time. Peace.
You want to talk to me?
We can't wait, but it's all an illusion.